Hey guys, how we doing? And welcome back to another video. So today I want to talk a little bit about homesickness as an expat. Now, I've had quite a few messages over the last couple of years, especially over the last year since being out here in the UAE, about what it's like to move abroad, obviously advice on schools and the area that I'm working in and stuff like that, but also on what it's like to be abroad and whether or not I get homesick, whether I get time and opportunity throughout the year to go home, whether family get to come out to me. And so I figured that I would speak on this and talk about my personal feelings about homesickness and give examples of the people that I know that have dealt with homesickness in slightly different ways. So if you are new to the channel, if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing. Also, if you find this video at all useful or you enjoy it, please hit that like button. It really does help. And if you want to know anything more about life as an expat, comment down below. Let's get into it. So I'd like to start this video by addressing the title, being an expat and struggling with homesickness. Now, I will start by saying that this really depends on your life so far, okay? For me, if I use myself as an example, I was born in Brighton. My parents then moved me over to West Sussex, where I grew up. It was me, my sister, my parents, and then we had obviously family, friends, we had childhood friends all around us up until I turned 18. By which point I then went off to university and I traveled over to Kent. Now Kent, from where I was living, was about an hour and a half to a 2-hour drive, and I was there for 4 years. Then after that, I went and did a postgraduate, which was done in Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. And I was out there for 6.5 months, and that was like a 7 or 8 hour flight away. And then when I returned from that, I then moved to Gloucestershire, which is where I was living before I then moved out here to the UAE. And that was 3 hours in the opposite direction. So from the age of 18, I have spent quite a lot of time away from home and away from my family. Far enough away that a visit for a cup of tea was not really possible. In order to have seen my family and my close friends, I needed to arrange a special event, book a weekend, go down and see them and actually schedule a time in. It's not as though my family was just around the corner and I could have just nipped out to go and see them and catch up. That just wasn't possible. Now, the reason I bring this up is because for me, at least, the thought and the idea of moving abroad was really exciting. I didn't really think about homesickness because I'd experienced not being able to see my family in the drop of a hat because of the distance. Now, okay, sure, living 2 or 3 hours away, I could get down to my parents, they could get up to me within a morning, so it wasn't that much of a difficulty to see each other. But when someone lives 2 or 3 hours away, you're not making that journey multiple times a week. You know, you specifically plan to go and see that person when they live that far away. An hour is probably a distance that you'd happily just leave in the morning and come back in the afternoon. Otherwise, you probably want to plan it because that's a full day effectively of travel and seeing the person and spending quality time with them. So the decision to move out to the UAE, obviously there were daunting areas for me, but being away from family and friends wasn't one of those issues. Conversely, I've met many people out here that have never moved away from home. They've always been around family and friends, and this was obviously a big move. And depending on how they settled in, some of them really liked it and obviously missed family, but managed. Others, within a few months, realized that they were terribly homesick and they were starting to consider moving back. So it really depends on your environment and it depends on your life so far, whether you've spent long periods of time away from your family and whether you've had to plan to see them or whether family have always been easily accessible and available to you. So before you think about anything else, those are the kind of things I want you to think about. Are you currently used to your family being really close to you, or are you already used to having to plan things and not have that quick access to them? Think about that first. I will also add that I am 29. I am in a relationship, but I've met my partner since being out here in the UAE. But aside from that, like, I don't have children. I don't really have that many ties back to home. Obviously, I've got my family whom I love very much, but I don't have any major ties. It's not as though I've got children or grandchildren back at home. Obviously, I've got my parents, I've got my sister, I've got my extended family, my grandpa, I've got my cousin and my auntie and my uncle and all that back home. But I don't have a major draw to back home. Whereas I'm sure, and I know because I've met lots of people like this, if you have a family and you've got children and you know that your children aren't going to be spending so much time with their grandkids, and maybe your parents are worried that they're going to miss those valuable moments with their grandchildren, that's something that you will need to consider. Now, I'm not going to speak on that because I'm not in that position. But some of the things that I do talk about in this video will hopefully help with that process. But that's something that you're going to need to figure out yourself. Now, my personal advice to anyone, regardless of your family situation, is what have you got to lose, right? Now, if you're thinking and considering moving abroad, there are probably reasons for that. Maybe you're excited for the opportunity to get some new challenge. Maybe you're a bit bored of home and you want to see somewhere new. Maybe you're looking to learn new languages and immerse yourself in new cultures. If you make that jump and you go for it and you realize that you are getting homesick, moving to this country is not actually for you, you do prefer being back in your home country or whichever country you reside in at the moment, you can reverse that decision. It's very, very simple well, it's not very simple, but you can reverse the decision. You can go back. It's not a permanent change. I know people since I've been out here that have got to the end of their first year and have gone, do you know what? It's not for me. I'm going back to the UK. I've known people that have survived 3 months and have gone, no, I need to go back. I miss family and friends too much. So there are options for you. And if you are looking to become a teacher, your school want you to be happy and comfortable in your new country. If you are not, they will do their best to support you, whatever your decision may then be. So what have you got to lose? Okay, so let's say you're in a position, which again, many people have messaged me about, and you're not really sure whether you're going to be homesick or whether you're not, what the rules are, what you can and cannot do. Now, to me, when I think back to when I was living in the UK, regardless of when I was at university, when I was living in Gloucestershire, as I said at the beginning of the video, I needed to specifically plan to see my family because the drive was long enough that you needed a full day or a weekend to make the most of the time with them because of the travel. The same applies living out here in the UAE. Now, a flight from Dubai, Abu Dhabi back to London is about 7.5 hours. So if I book a flight, can wake up from my apartment in the morning and I will be with my family in the evening. So within a day, okay, it's a day's travel. You're not just going to do that necessarily for a weekend, although I know many people who have done. You can see your family and make those travel arrangements within one day. It's not like you've got masses of time to get from place A to place B. You can do it within a day. So if you wanted, for instance, during your half-term breaks or your end-of-term breaks, to go back home and see your family, and remember, that is 3 times a year, you can book that in. Obviously, unlike being able to jump in the car, which will just take you a tank of fuel to and from potentially, it is more costly. However, depending on the school you go with, there is an expat allowance, which basically gives you additional finances to support those flights. Now, for my school, I get one return flight back to and from the UK every year. And that just gets added to my monthly wage. So I am being paid the additional money so that when it comes to, for instance, the winter break, when I'm going home, I then have that money that I can use on flights. So in the whole scheme of things, you can go back relatively easy. You just need to consider the wallah. The wallah? The dollar? Money. Now, I am going to be realistic. The chances are you're not going to be going back to your home country 3-4 times a year. Probably once or twice at the maximum. Now, I will add on the side here that I do know people that do go back more frequently during their half-term or end-of-term breaks because they've got husbands at home or wives at home, they've got children back at home that they really desperately want to see and spend time with. And so when they do have those breaks, they prioritize going back home. Obviously, you do have to think about money, which I said just now, but there is that option. I, for instance, don't do that. I would rather make the most of my half-term breaks by relaxing. First of all, travel is tiring, so relaxing. And lots of people that I know in a similar position to me travel around the world. So the last summer just gone, as you will have seen from previous videos, I went off to Asia. I didn't go back home. There's many places around the UAE that I could travel to, like Jordan, Kuwait, Oman. And again, depending on where you decide that you're going to move to, you will have lots of surrounding countries that would be exciting to travel to. But you don't need to go home to be able to catch up with your family and friends. And there are many ways of doing so. Now, the method that I use to contact my family most often is either WhatsApp. WhatsApp is so easy. You can use it anywhere. You can send voice notes, pictures. You can catch up with people. This isn't new technology. Most of you probably already have WhatsApp on your phone. Another one is Zoom or other video platforms. Now, the UAE do restrict certain videoing platforms. So I can't, for instance, just FaceTime someone from back home. But Zoom is a website that I can access and my family can access. So again, like I said earlier on, yesterday evening, I Zoomed my family, spent an hour and a half, 2 hours on the phone to them. And I got to do that face-to-face virtual connection with them. I got to see them. They could show me their faces and we can have that interaction. I found out recently, you can also do the same with Alexa. She didn't turn on. Where you can tell her to call your family phone, or if obviously they need an Alexa or the Alexa app, but you can communicate via Alexa, which is also very useful. Shh. From my experience of moving away, often the environment that you're in either positively or negatively impacts the time that you spend in that location. So everywhere that I've lived, I've tried to pull memorabilia, memories, photographs from home to that new location. I did the same thing when I was in the UK, and I've done the same thing whilst I've been here. So I have photos and like little items from back home that make me feel like I'm in a very homely environment. So I've got pictures of my family up. I've got little things that I've won or had from back home, old school photos and things like that around my apartment. So on a daily basis, I am seeing pictures of my sister. I'm seeing pictures of my mum and dad and my grandparents. And that makes you feel very homely. Now, obviously that can have the adverse impact of making you miss them even more. But if you don't have anything and you're just in a shell of an apartment or villa and on a daily basis, it starts to drag you down. And I've had that as well in the past, where you just want to be in a more positive, uplifting environment. So making sure that wherever you move to, you do take some photographs with that you can hang up. You do make the effort to make your environment feel homely, will add to the feeling that you belong. Whereas if you don't have that infrastructure in place and you don't really enjoy coming back home to your apartment at the end of the day, then you are more likely to miss home and those home comforts that you might not get. So that's something to consider too. All in all, guys, I would say it depends on your situation. I know that that's a horrible way to end and wrap up a video, but it really does depend on your situation. I would say if you know you're someone that suffers with homesickness, then maybe moving abroad isn't the right decision for you. If you're someone that doesn't, then great, give it a go. You might find that actually being away from family and not being able to see them as frequently draws you closer to them. And then you could be a bit like myself, where I know that I get homesick every now and then, where I'm really excited to see my family, but it doesn't stop me from living my life and enjoying living in a different country. And whether I stay here for another few years, whether I move on somewhere else, I have the flexibility to do that. And I still know that I will get to see my family throughout the year. So it really depends on you. What I would say is if you're umming and ahhing and you've never left your home country, just go for it. Like I say, what do you have to lose? If you don't enjoy it, you can always change your mind and move back home. But if you don't do it, you'll never know. Okay, guys, that is the end of today's video. As I said at the beginning, if you enjoyed it or found this at all useful, please consider subscribing and hit that like button. It really does help. If you want to know anything more about expat life, especially out here in the UAE, please comment down below. And I'll see you next time. Peace out, guys. Bye.